exactly is soil anyways?
There's something here living under the floor. I haven't seen it, but I know it's there. No, I'm so scared I wear my underwear. That's why I don't wanna go down, down, down in the basement. I don't wanna go.
Soil. What is the function of your soil? When we are talking about it in terms of lawn care and gardening, in the context of plant growth and development, a soil's function is to provide support for that plant life, to be the source of the mineral nutrients, to allow oxygen down in that root zone, to allow those roots to function properly, to hold water so that water is there when the plant really needs it. This soil functionality is attributed to the physical properties of soil. There are physical properties of soil, and there is the soil chemistry piece. The soil chemistry piece is directly influenced by the physical properties. When we are talking about physical properties of soil, we are talking about soil texture, soil structure, bulk density, organic matter content, as well as those voids in the soil, the airspace. These physical properties of soil are easily one of the most critical components of soil for the long-term performance in the health of our landscaping, our grass, our shrubs, our trees, our herbaceous perennials, vegetables, all of our vegetation, anything that grows out of that soil is all reliant on the physical properties of soil. We have to have a deep understanding of these characteristics of soil, so when we do make the decisions out in our yards, out in our lawns and gardens, we know how it is affecting the system. So that's what we're getting into here. More specifically, we are getting into soil texture. So hey, welcome back. This is episode 4, in which we are discussing your soil texture. When we talk about soil texture, I am simply talking about the relative abundance and the proportions of your sand, silt, and clay. Soil texture is easily one of the most important and permanent fixtures of your soil system. It kind of drives the bus. It drives the whole system from a functionality standpoint. Alrighty, so here we go. Back in the lab, nice and toasty. Let's get right into this thing. All right, so I want to refer back to this graph of a typical soil sample and how it breaks down. I drew one of these in that first episode, but it wasn't nearly as snazzy as this. So, like I said before, 50% of that soil sample is going to be pore space. And within that pore space, at any given moment with weather events and or compaction issues, you are at 20 to 30% water and air interchangeably on that phase of soil. In the solid phase of soil, you have got the organic matter and you have got that mineral fraction, which is your sands, your silts, and your clays. The abundance and the proportion of those sands, silts, and clays is what makes up your texture. The size of those mineral particles and the combination thereof is kind of what gives you your texture, and we're going to get into the specifics of that in a couple seconds here. But just as a point of reference, when you magnify the sand, silts, and clays, a particle of sand is the largest, and let's imagine that being a beach ball. Next in line would be silt, and compared to that, that is going to be a volleyball. And when we're talking about clay, we are talking about a marble. Those are kind of the 3 different sizes of your particles. And again, that is derivative of that parent material and those 5 soil forming factors. See, this is all starting to kind of come together here. The climate, the organisms or the biology present because of that climate, wherever you are in the world, the relief, the topography of your land, the parent material, whatever your original parent material was, and how long, the time piece of it, how long was this soil developing. That all plays into this soil texture piece. So as you can imagine, the proportion and abundance of all of these various particles that make up our soil texture obviously are unique to your location. So that has given rise to 20,000 plus soil series out there. Now see, there's another reference to another episode. All of this is starting to tie in soil series, right? What kind of soil is in your area? or more specifically, your soil texture. Let's keep this texture. The line gets blurred between soil texture, soil structure, and the all-encompassing term of soil composition, which are technically three different things, especially structure and texture. They flow right into each other, but they are in fact two different properties. So let's keep this just texture. Again, at the risk of sounding redundant, soil texture is a key feature. It has a profound effect on the rest of the physical properties of your soil system. So now that I've beat the importance of soil texture into your brains, now is a good time for you to go out into your yard, into your garden beds, and pick up a handful of soil and feel it. This is kind of the first way to determine the texture of your soil. Is it gritty? Does it feel like sandpaper in between your fingers? Does it take on the consistence of a talcum powder or a baking flour? Is it clay rich? Can you make a long ribbon with it if you kind of pinch it between your thumb and your forefinger? I can typically make a little bit of a ribbon because I am clay rich, but I'm loamy as well, so this does crumble real nice in my hands. So that's the first step in kind of determining what the texture might be, but then we can take that a step further. The USDA has come up with a generally accepted method for determining your soil texture in a more accurate manner by utilizing what is called the soil texture triangle. And I will get at that in just a second here. But within that methodology, the USDA has come up with 12 soil texture classifications. And they are sand, loamy sand, sandy loam, loam, silt loam, silt, sandy clay loam, silty clay loam, sandy clay, silty clay, and of course, God forbid if you are all clay all day. So now that you're aware of the various soil textures that are out there in the world, let's find out which one you have. Here's where the fun begins. Let's all wear our best Don Herbert Mr. Wizard's World hat and get all sciencey up in here. We can do this with our kids, our 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, our 4th graders, our 7th graders. Find yourself a jar. If you are incredibly OCD like me, then you will search high and low for the perfect vessel, vertical sides all the way down with a flat bottom. This was a jar of imported Polish pickles. They were disgusting. I dumped them out, and I am now going to use this for my soil texture test. Bonus points to you if you find a vessel that looks like the container that had the acid in it from Superman 3, or whatever it takes. Cool. So my suggestion would be to have all of your stuff right there at your fingertips ready to go. I've got a little container of water, I've got my vessel, and I've got a little pot full of soil that I collected throughout my yard, about 6 to 8 inches deep, various spots wherever you want to kind of test this thing. Dump it out, let it kind of air dry a little bit longer than maybe what I did here for illustrative purposes, but you're dumping it out, you're taking sticks and stones and twigs and leaves out of there. You get it into your vessel about 3/4 of the way full. And then you simply pour the water in there. Now, it can be just straight tap water. I have read various literature where they do say that you could use a teaspoon of a water softener, kind of a wetting agent, to kind of separate the particles a little bit better. But, I mean, it works if you just use your tap water. It might just take a little bit more squinting and whatnot. This is not going to be like you might see illustrated in a book where it's perfectly layered out. You put it in there, you fill it all the way up with water, and you shake it vigorously. So you shook it vigorously. You set it on a flat surface. All of those particles start settling. The sand is the first one to settle. A little bit after that is when that silt settles right above it, and then the next day you check on it and your clay would have settled. So I took a paint marker and I made lines of delineation for the sand, silt, and clay, and then I'm going to measure these out. When I measure these, I am using inches on this tape measure, but then I'm converting those to millimeters because it makes life a lot easier when you're trying to figure out percentages. So sand was 1.5 inches, which is 38 millimeters. Okay, silt was 1 1/8 for 29 millimeters. Clay, 1 3/8 for 35 millimeters. The total amount of all of that is 102. So you go back, sand, 38 millimeters divided by 102 gives you an answer there, and then you times that by 100 to find your percentage. So, you do that for all three, obviously. You do round up, but sand, you got 37. Silt, I have 28. Clay comes in at 35%. Now let's look at the triangle here. You go to the bottom of the triangle, you draw a line up and to the left where you find your percentage of sand. You go to the silt side, you draw a line down and to the left. And on the clay side, you draw a line straight across to the right. Where those three lines intersect, that is your soil texture. We always strive for that holy grail of loamy soil. It's pretty rare to be straight loam from a mineral soil standpoint. If you have a good amount of organic material in your lawn, in your garden beds, that kind of contributes to that friable tilth. And on that same note, it's pretty rare to have any kind of a singular component such as clay. You're not ever all clay all day. You're never really all sand, okay? And when I do say sand, quick side note to that, we're not just talking about the stuff that you see in a sandbox or at the beach. Sand can be many different types of geological material, weathered down into that tiny particle size. The particle size is kind of what constitutes something as sand or not. Silt, there's elements of silt that are the same geological material as sand, but it's just that size that kind of we're talking about. Clay's a little bit different because that's formed under certain processes and stuff like that, but I'm obviously not going to get into all of that. So why should I care? What does it mean to me, right? That's something we always have to ask when we're talking about these things, when we're learning about a functioning system such as your soil. We talked about how important soil texture is, and that's because it plays such a functioning role right in the center of the whole system. So, these are the things that kind of come back to soil texture. Your parent material, the mineral content therein, decides what your pH is. As soil and that geological material is weathered over time, your pH changes. If you've got a high amount of clay and organic matter, you have got the capacity to buffer that soil pH. Cation exchange inherently is affected by soil texture. Cation exchange inadvertently affects soil pH. So when those root tips are exchanging hydrogen ions for those nutrient ions, your soil pH is moving. And soil pH has a lot to do with those mineral nutrient levels that you find on your soil test. That's what I mean about soil chemistry being affected by the physical properties of soil. Know these physical aspects. Know what your soil parent material is. Know what your soil texture is. Know what your structure is like. Are you working to build all that? If you are sandy, you do not quite have that water holding capacity. You are going to have to water your lawns and gardens differently. You are going to have to fertilize or utilize inputs from your end in a different way if you do not have that nutrient holding capacity with sand. Are you working to be able to hold these nutrients? When you're using these high concentration fertilizers, are you taking a giant bowl of water and trying to dump it into a Dixie cup all at once and then have the rest of it go down into our waterways and affect our aquatic wildlife? These are the things you need to be thinking about. Not what aisle does Home Depot have the boron correcting material, because my soil test says I'm low on boron. On the other hand, if you have clay, that has a greater surface area and holds a charge, meaning basically that it is going to retain and utilize nutrients in a more productive way. It is going to not drain the same as sand. It is going to have that water holding capacity, but it could be to a fault. People give clay a bad rap. I've got heavy clay. I've got heavy clay. Clay is good. You want clay. But, too much of a good thing can be bad. Very, very clay rich with very little organic matter and very little porosity in your soil. You've got compaction issues, which lead to a myriad of problems, and you don't have that water draining ability either. There are certain physical properties of soil that we can look at and really sort of dissect and fine tune that is going to play a part in the rest of your soil as a system. A lot of times we send out our soil for soil tests just to see, okay, what do I got to do? What do I got to put into my soil? That's really not how we should be looking at this thing. We should be looking at, okay, this is what my soil test is telling me, but here is my soil composition. Here are all of the other physical properties going on with my soil. If I do this and this to kind of fix some of these physical properties, that might kind of change my pH to this, which is going to get some of these other nutrient levels in line here. You know, it's a moving, working system. It's nature, God forbid. So it's never to be looked at as a static assessment in terms of a traditional soil chemistry test. Let's look at this thing as a work of art, as a tapestry. All of these little intricacies down in this corner that are woven into the fabric, how do they tie in with the area over here to kind of work as a total composition? That's how we should be looking at soil. Know what's going on underneath your feet in the intricacies down here. You know, when we're reading that soil test, we could have a deeper understanding. I'm going to get out of here and let you get into your soil. Get that dirt up into your fingernails and put it in the jar and shake it up and have fun doing it with your kids. Get your family involved. A conventional soil test, if it's a good one, should tell you what your texture is, but it's nowhere near as fun as this.
It's your hand to control. It's your hand to control.